Patty Simpson with Simpson Math. In this video, we're going to find the percent of various numbers. Remember that a percent is just a fraction with a 100 in the denominator. So here I have 27% of 50. We're going to find that 27% of 50. Remember that 27%, you just take the percent sign and turn it into a denominator of 100. So I can write 27% as a fraction. I can also write that 27% as a decimal, where the 7 is in the hundredths place, 27 hundredths. When I am finding a percent of a number, I'm just simply going to multiply. So I'm simply going to multiply this 27 hundredths times 50. Now, I'd like to also in this video show you how to begin to approximate, how to begin to think about your answer so that at the end you can go, is that reasonable? Is that answer make sense here? And if we think about this 27% or 27 out of 100, it's really close to 25%. And we've seen in other videos that when I look at 25%, that's equal to 1/4. So one thing I can do is, since that's really close to 1/4 or 25%, I can take this 50 and just divide it by 4. And 4 goes in there a little more than 10 times. You know, if it were 40, it would go in there 10 times. So it goes in there a little bit more than that. So when I get my answer, I'm going to expect it to be somewhere around 10. That's going to tell me that I've gotten a reasonable answer. Now, back to the problem. To find 27%, I'm just going to take and multiply times the 50. So I'm just going to take that 27 hundredths and multiply it times 50. Remember, when you multiply with a decimal, just ignore the decimal to begin with and just do your simple multiplication. So 0 times that just gives me 0. Then 5 times 7 is 35, carry your 3. 5 times 2 is 10, plus those 3 gives me 13. Now I'll pay attention to the decimal. There were 2 numbers behind the decimal here, so there's going to be 2 numbers behind my decimal in my answer. So $13.50 is 27% of 50. Notice that it is a little more than 10. That's what we had approximated. That's what we said it should be. So that's a reasonable answer. Let's now find 17% of 160. Again, I'm going to first approximate in my head so that when I get my answer, I can ask myself, is that reasonable? So 17% is really close to 20 out of 100. You know, that's really close to 20%. So I'm going to think to myself about 20%. And how many 20s are there in 100? Well, there's 5 of them. Think about money. There are 5 $20 bills in 100. So I'm going to take and divide this by 5. Well, 5 goes in there 3 times with 1 left over. It goes in there, goes to 10 2 times. So about 30-ish times. 5 goes in there about 30 times. So when I get my answer here, it should be somewhere around 30. If my answer is 300 or only 3, then I know that's not being reasonable. It should be somewhere around 30. So again, though, all I do is take this 17%, which I could write as a fraction, or I could write it as a decimal, and I simply multiply it times the 160. So I'm going to take that 17, and I'm going to multiply it times 160. Again, I'm going to ignore the decimal to begin with. I'm just going to write down that 0. Then 6 times 7 is 42, carry your 4. 6 times 1 is 6. Plus the 4 gives me 10. So this was my 0, this was my 6, my 1 is 17. So I'm just going to write down that 17. Add my numbers together, 7, 2. Once I've done my multiplication, then I count to see how many digits are behind the decimal. And there are 2 digits behind the decimal. So 2 digits behind the decimal. Notice that my answer is really close to 30. Which is what we said it should be. So that is a reasonable answer. 17% of 160 is 27 and 2/10. We can do the same thing with words. Here it says, in a packet of 40 Skittles, 30% are red. How many Skittles are in the packet? So really, I'm just trying to find 30% of the 40. So I'm just simply going to multiply 30% times 40. This time I'll do it with the fraction. Actually, let's use our 10% trick that we've learned in a previous video. We know that to find 10% of 40, remember if I do 10% of 40, that all it does is take the decimal from behind and move it over one spot. So 10% of 40 is simply equal to 4. So then if I want to find 30% of it, I just take that and multiply it times the 3. So if 10% of 40 is 4, that tells me that 30% of 40, 20% would be 8, and 30% would be 12. I just take that and multiply it times 3. So sometimes using your 10% rule, it really is helpful. It just moves that decimal over one spot. Here's another example of that. In a group of 30 children, 80% can swim. How many children in the group can swim? Again, all I'm doing is 80% of 30. So to find 80% of 30, I'm just going to multiply. We can use our 10% rule though to help us again. We know that 10% of 30, again, it just moves that decimal spot over one spot. So that's equal to 3. So then 80%, we just take that and multiply it times the 8. 80% of 30 then, well, you take 8 and multiply it times the 3 to get 24. So that tells us 24 children can swim. The big deal is when you're trying to find the percent of a number, all you have to do is multiply. Just simply multiply. And you can multiply by the fractional form or you can multiply by the decimal form of that number. Math Made Simple is some math. Thanks for watching.